George Clooney and Brad Pitt's new movie, Wolves, is on Apple TV Plus September 27th.
That's where I want you to be now.
So if you want to see George Clooney and Brad Pitt, go to Apple TV Plus.
You got to start the story there.
Or if you want to see Brad Pitt and George Clooney, go to Apple TV Plus.
I am enjoying the show.
And if you want to see their new movie, Wolves,
You can't do it, I'm going to help you out. I can do it, so do it.
definitely go to Apple TV Plus.
Admit it is cool. Okay, fine, it was very cool.
Wolves, streaming September 27th on Apple TV Plus. Rated R.
Ampire. Hey babies, hey babies. Hi everyone, hi everyone, hi everyone, hi everyone. What's up, Callow? Happy Tuesday to you.
Happy Tuesday. It's always nice when you get to watch the Eagles lose at the last second and then go to bed.
We'll get to that.
Yes.
Also, I don't see you in person as much anymore because as you can tell, if you're watching this on YouTube, that we're like doing this at a different time of the day, and I'm not doing it from the sparkling new studios. I'm doing it from my basement. If you like my little set that I've made, but we are going to see each other tonight. We're going to a concert together. How about that?
Yeah. How about that? I was talking to my brother over the weekend, and I said, "Yeah, we're going to Joey Valance and Bray," and I realized we've seen them twice together, which is a weird thing for how long we've known each other. That we've seen them twice together. I'm
also
throwing it out
like
there.
By far not close going to be the oldest person there. And I'm okay with it. I think these guys are like Beastie Boys reincarnated in some way. And I loved the Beastie Boys growing up. And I think these guys at least have an original sound. So I really enjoy them. And I always like going to small venue type concerts too, when it's an act I want to see. And they're at the Atlantis. And I've actually never been. So I'm checking that box off tonight. Very excited to do all this.
This will be my fourth time there. It's a great venue. It's 9:30 light. It's the same vibes. It's great. So yeah, I will see you tonight.
As I mentioned, and I like to reiterate, if you're listening to this either on ESPN 630 or as the podcast, which will come out every day at noon, like right after the show airs, we are taping a lot of the show on YouTube. So you can come to the Ampire Media YouTube page. We had about 2,500 views yesterday of the one off the Giants game. So I was very happy to see all that. So it's growing. So if you don't know, you can see us do this on the Ampire Media YouTube page. It comes out at 12 as well, right after the show airs on ESPN 630, and download the podcast. Thank you very much. All right, let me now stick to sports. You like that, don't you? You like that. Oh yeah. That was a full on, you like that last night. Full on, you like that. Kirk looked just fine, looked just fine. Arm looked good. Pocket looked good. They did a self-inflicted, made-up quarterback controversy by drafting a player who could replace somebody that they just gave a contract to because they think they're in win-now mode after week one, where their offense was stuck in the mud, apparently against Tomlin. I didn't know what to think tonight. This felt like a bad spot to be in, and it screamed 0-2. Turned out to be a very close, defensive-oriented game. Back and forth, bunch of lead changes, and Kirk got an opportunity. And the Eagles, I don't know what they were thinking on this drive, but they brought zero pressure on him, allowed him all the time in the world, and they went down the field. They almost got down there so fast, they had to slow down to try to avoid the Eagles having too much time on the other side to win. They get the ball back with 140 something on the clock. And they got down there so fast in scoring position that they were actively starting to try to run some clock because they knew they were going to score too fast on them.
This is our first Nick Sirianni. Your seat is warming up. There were two coaching decisions that absolutely botched this game. It was the one you just mentioned, and then passing on third down and Saquon dropping the ball. Don't overthink this. I don't get it. I know you're going for the win, but you could have ran more clock, kicked the field goal, and they have way less time to do this. This is Sirianni again.
Oof. See, I don't have an issue with that decision. Saquon's got to catch the ball. That was a perfectly executed play to a great player. He catches it, game's over. So I'll because it didn't work. I'll hear out you shouldn't have done that, but I think on that one, That's not the coaches. The players got to execute. And he dropped a wide open screen pass that would have easily gotten a first down and the game's over. So I'm not blaming the coaches on that one. Like in this regard, like I'll kill them on what they did defensively after it. And they obviously like the screw up left too much time on the clock for Kirk. Either way, whether they kick the field goal or not. But I'm not blaming Sirianni for Barkley dropping a screen pass when he's wide open. Like I'm not going to blame Sirianni for that.
Here's the deal, though. You have Saquon, you have one of the best offensive lines in football, and you had 4 yards to go. Like, as far as I'm concerned, you could have ran it, and if you couldn't get 4 yards, you chalk it up to the Falcons. But it's not like this is some team that can't run the ball or doesn't have a good running back. They knew that they were going to run the ball. They were also on a short side of the field. You could have ran it to the long side of the field like they did with that pass and gone that route. I'm with you. They have to execute. And he needs to catch that. But you still made that play call, so that result could have happened if it got screwed up.
I'll kill them on a lot of stuff. The way they played defense or the way they approached it for the last drive once they gave him the ball back, well, that was ridiculous. Like that was completely ridiculous. The throw Hurts made because they had time on the clock at the end of the game. The ridiculous throw that he just threw up there that Jesse Bates picked off, where he just chucked it up in the middle of like coverage, was ridiculous. But therein lies like second one, I would say. That's on the players. Like Hurts, Sirianni didn't tell Hurts to do that. Like that was he needed to chuck that out of bounds and live to see another day because they had enough time and they have a really good kicker that they had enough time to try to get something off and he got desperate. And I don't blame Sirianni for the Saquon. I don't even blame him for the call. They went for the win. They had the perfect call. One of their best players is literally wide open. It's a nothing pass. He's got to make that play. So I'm not going to kill the coaches on that part. Defensively, I don't know what they were thinking once they gave Cousins the ball back, like bring in 3, no pressure, allowing. Are you kidding? Like, have you seen this guy play? So I thought that was really bad and, good for us, obviously, because, the path for Washington to have a season that ends up where they're talking about winning potentially a wild card spot. It's the way I talk about it now. They need Dallas and Philly or one of the two to go sideways, or one of them to be 7-10, 8-9, something like that. I had a hard time looking at Philadelphia's roster and feeling like that's going to happen. But here was example one of, we know what happened last year. They blew a home game. I'm sure WIP postgame last night was awesome. And we'll see what happens because I think we all know that is a fragile locker room. Off of what happened a year ago, that is a very fragile locker room. They come in with all the pressure again because no one thinks outside of this area that Washington can really contend for the division. Everyone knows the Giants can't right now. And Dallas is not as good as they were a year ago. I don't care how you try to put lipstick on that pig. They're not. So Philadelphia, off of going sideways with a weird locker room and a crater, have all the pressure in the world of supposedly having to win the division. And I still think they will. But this was really good example one of, let's test them and see if they're as cohesive as they try to pretend they're going to be off of last year after blowing a home game on Monday Night Football for no good reason whatsoever.
I would say this, though, on Hurts. That's the second one this season that's been like, you're getting paid way too much money to make a pass like that. Like he did the one in the first quarter or the second quarter of the Green Bay game where he threw it into triple coverage. And it was like, what are you doing? You're too good for that. You're not the type of quarterback that should be making that throw. And then last night, I think the most egregious thing about last night's throw was not only was that one in double coverage, but Buck was saying it the whole time, or Aikman was saying it the whole time. They only needed 15 yards to get into field goal range. So
that's why you need to eat that. Yes.
Yeah, like why are you even chucking that up? That's you're kind of just that's a low IQ throw because you should just chuck it, survive, and get another chunk play, and all of a sudden you're in business. That was a really weird one because he made that throw like they needed to score a touchdown, and they didn't. And that's where I actually think was really egregious as well. Is how do you not realize kind of what the score is, how much time you got to know, hey, just calm down. You only need to make 1 or 2 more plays, and you've got this thing. So it's really, really bad.
That was a ridiculous throw. And I don't blame Sirianni if he didn't tell him to do that. That was a ridiculous throw. He did it last year in that Jets game. Remember they lost to the Jets That was one of the games that Wilson won. It was like a big surprise. Probably was like one of the surprise. It was probably should have been one of the markers of, it's going to go wrong for them when he threw a really terrible pass like that at the end of a game, like a really desperate, really bad, terrible pass. And he did it again last night, albeit if Saquon Barkley catches this pass on the previous drive, they win. Like the game's over. They would have run the clock out. The game would have been over. So there's two sides of it. Like the players have to execute. And in both of those cases, they didn't. And they were big reasons why they lost. Like even the other day, I was rewatching the Commanders game into review, and I want to talk about a little bit of it. But like the reality is, like, had the Giants had a kicker, we're not really sure what the result would have been. But really secondarily, if you really think about it, if Malik Neighbors makes what should have been not an easy catch, but not that difficult of one on a 4th and 4 play, they run the clock out and kick a field goal and win. And so, like, were we lucky the other day? A little bit. Like a really, really good player dropped a pass he's going to catch 9 out of 10 times, it's sometimes you need a break. The Atlanta Falcons got one last night. The Commanders got a couple of them the other day. And that's how close this league is. Like, I don't think anyone thinks the Giants are great. I don't think anyone, outside of the area thinks the Commanders are great either. And I think a lot of people look at Atlanta and go, that could be window dressing. That might, I'm not sure I buy their defense, et cetera, all the things about them that nobody says like Super Bowl, but I'll buy with Kirk there and all those offensive weapons will actually be pretty good. Still in the end, all these results are come down to execution of a play here or there. And in both of these games, Malik Neighbors makes a catch on a 4th and 4. Washington probably loses the other day, assuming Daniel Jones doesn't fumble the ball. And they just run the clock out and actually, they couldn't kick a game-winning field goal. They would have had to score a touchdown. That's weird.
Yeah.
Saquon Barkley makes that catch last night. Philly wins. Like they run the clock out. And the craziest part is it's not a hard play. It's a screen pass with nobody right. It actually was the perfect call. They loaded up on the line expecting him to run the ball, and they didn't. He's got to catch the pass. Otherwise, we're not talking about this. Everything that happened afterwards is choose your own adventure, and the Eagles picked the wrong one for sure. For sure.
What's funny about this game too is it was low scoring, but the Eagles showed cracks on like both major parts. They couldn't stop the run. Bijan Robinson went crazy in the second half, and then Algier even was making these really, really big chunk plays. All of a sudden, if you're Washington, you're liking that both of their running backs were able to run on that defense. And then when they decide not to run the ball and that last drive, the pass defense was non-existent. So what's Roseman going to do? Because every time we've seen them have a weakness, he goes out and signs whoever the next, best players are on the board are. I don't know how you fix that overnight, but that was a bad scheme-wise in terms of their defense that all of a sudden they couldn't stop either the pass or the run in the third and fourth quarters.
I'm actually, now I think about it, I'm dying to know. I'd like to ask Dayball, had Neighbors made that catch, you guys started to obviously run the clock down no matter what, and you didn't score a touchdown, would you have tried a short field goal to try to win, or would you have run, like, let's just say the ball's at the 8-9 yard line, so it's not like we're on the goal line, of course we're going to try to run it in or whatever. If they were down to the clock's going to run out, Washington's not going to get the ball back, the game is tied, it's a chip shot field goal, but it's your punter that has to kick it, and you already saw him shank one, would you have done that over like a 3rd and goal at the 9 on the last play of the game? Like, it's an interesting question for him. Like, what would he have done? Would he have just said, you know what? Why not? Give him a shot. Let's just see if he makes it, and we'll see if we'll win.
My guess is he would have just treated it like 4-down territory. Like the 3rd down play would have been. I
think they might have kicked. I think like if it was like a 3rd and goal from the 10 or something where it's actually not a high percentage play, and it's a 27-yard field goal, I would give him a shot and try to kick it and see what's the worst. You go to overtime. What's the worst happens?
Dude, they weren't kicking extra points. He wasn't going to kick it. I mean, like he tapped out. He gave it one shot. Was like, nope. And then they didn't kick for the rest of the game. So I say no. I think they would have gone for it.
I wonder. All right. Let me talk about some of the stuff. I did some film review last night. I don't think there's a lot really to go over here, but there are a few things. And I was actually, often I talk about this a lot, like what you think you saw and then what you see later. You have a very, very different feeling about the whole thing. I largely feel very good about the advancement of the offense in just a week. Obviously, these are two very different opponents. One that blitzed a lot. The Giants actually blitzed more in this. I'm not surprised. Blitzed more in this game than they did in their opener. against Minnesota, probably because they saw a lot of the success of at least getting Jayden to move very quickly. And I don't blame them for wanting to do that. It is obviously very dangerous with him because, his legs are really one of his best weapons. But I would say this, and I came to this conclusion, and I was actually surprised in rewatching it. In the first game, I thought way too much was made of how many carries he had. It wasn't by design. A lot of it was scrambles. A lot of it, I felt like in the first half was just his internal clock being a little sped up, being in a debut against a team that use exotic blitz packages and uses them regularly. I hadn't seen a lot of this. And it's one thing to do it in your VR headset, and it's another thing to in real time when Yaya Diaby's chasing you and did some loop and nobody blocked him. Okay. And he's coming running free at you. It's different. And so I'm not like giving him a pass. I'm just saying like it was his debut. And I think largely, my takeaway from him was instinctually he's doing the right things with the ball. He's not putting it in harm's way. And that's why I feel really good about the whole thing. And things will slow down. If this is the baseline, it's going to get a lot better. After rewatching the Giants game where they did blitz more than they did against Minnesota, and did get some pressure on him. I actually felt like in this case, he ran a little too much. And I'm not trying to be nitpicky or jump back on a narrative with him, but this one was, I felt even a little more like exaggerated than, if that's the right word for this, in the amount of times that he took off and used his legs. It was clear to me, it is still, and this shouldn't be a surprise, it was his second game. It's still very clear to me that his internal clock remains a little bit sped up. So I actually feel like he ran the ball a little too much more this time than he did in the previous game, where I understood the reasoning and there were a good amount of designed runs in the second half. And then when people were complaining about the design runs, I was like, one was a 4th and 1 rollout and 2 were 1-yard touchdown runs. So like, can we just erase those as anybody would do that? And that actually makes sense to put into a game plan and like talk about the other ones and use those as the examples of like whether he ran too much or didn't, and stop just looking at totals. In this case, I actually had the feeling that he actually ran the ball a little bit too much this time. And I wonder if the coaches agree with me, and I'm going to talk to him about it later this week.
Yeah, I mean, in person, it didn't seem as exaggerated. I will say that they definitely picked his spots, I think, a little bit better, if that makes sense. Like to me, it seemed like he was kind of trying to, I thought in person, I could tell he was trying to weigh whether to take the sack or actually take off and do it. And I think that's what led to a couple of those sacks too. Like
twice in the red zone, like a lot of people, they kept talking about the penalties in the red zone, which were a huge deal for a lot of that derailed. Twice happened inside the 5 where they had, procedural penalties, and unfortunately they could not overcome them. Twice though, he took sacks on red zone plays where he tried to extend it and really just needed to chuck it out of bounds and get rid of it. And he waited just too long. And in both cases, one of them, they made up for it. It was a bad sack back at the 20. And then Austin Eckler on a 3rd and 14 got a 13-yard run that gave him an opportunity. And that's where one of those penalties happened that backed them up, and they ended up kicking one of the field goals. But the other one also derailed one of the red zone ones. And, in most cases, if you take a sack like that and you have 3rd and 14, you're not going to have an opportunity to make up for it. I appreciate that they kind of, quote unquote, made up for the mistakes. I was talking about this last week. They weren't not prepared. They weren't able to overcome their mistakes a week ago, which to me was like, duh. I mean, this is all brand new, rookie quarterback. Everything's new. Like, obviously, like they're not going to be some well-oiled machine. And they played a team that is. Go look at their record. Go look at how they played. Like in this case, I felt like there was a humongous leap with that. Like when they made some mistakes, they were able to make up for it. It happened numerous times on the opening drive. It happened numerous times throughout. Like, you don't score on every drive when you have the ball if you're not able to overcome mistakes. And they did. And that's an enormous positive to me. But in this case, in the red zone plays and a couple other times, it felt more exaggerated to me this time that he ran a little bit too much, put his body on the line maybe a little bit too much. And I'm not trying to jump on a narrative again. It's just what I saw. And I actually felt like it was more pronounced against the Giants than it actually was against Tampa. And we'll see how it goes against Cincinnati.
Yeah, I would say too, like we didn't even bring up the play where he got the wind knocked out of him too. Like that was one where he actually, I felt like this game too, he took too many unnecessary hits too.
100%.
I thought he slid way better in the Tampa game, or attempts at sliding was way better in the Tampa game. And this one, for some reason, it didn't seem like he felt like it was risky or something. And he took a few of those hits that I didn't like at all. Yeah. Same thing though. I'll go back to though at the end though. They saved that one option run for him, and it ends up being the dagger against him. I think this is just going to be a live and die by his running a little bit week to week, and we're just gonna get different results until we kind of figure out what's the right thing to do with him.
You're gonna hear I did a segment with Logan Paulson next coming up, and for the booth review show that I do with the Commanders, and we had talked about a lot of this stuff on this show, and for me, like, the reality here is, and this is the hardest part of this because it's only 2 games in, like, I don't want to like advocate for let's put all these rules on this guy. Like, he's like instinctually, this is the best part of him. Instinctually, he really just kind of knows how to play. Like, he's got this feel for it. I used to say this about Heineke. What I loved about Heineke was he has these incredible instincts. I just don't think he had a high enough ceiling of athleticism to pull it off. Like, and that's where that was like but that's why I loved him. Instinctually, he was so good. This guy's a much higher level caliber athlete in running, throwing, the whole thing. He's got the whole package. He just needs to figure out, I think, the timing, and I think he will. So that's why I'm like, I like pause in like criticizing him this way, because I'm sitting there going, he's played 2 games, but I'm just telling you what I saw and where it's going. But I also don't want to be someone who's going, you have to do this and you have to do that. I don't need him thinking about 58 rules when he lines up to make a play, when he's showing the ability to get it done on his own, using his own instincts. I think we're all just fearful of him using his legs and getting hurt. I think it's really probably, we all know we have a good thing here. And I think this all comes back to, please don't get hurt. And when he's putting his body on the line, especially in spots where he doesn't have to, that's where we all want to be like his parent or something and be like, please stop doing that.
I wouldn't even say we're criticizing it. I think we need to take into account of what's happening week to week, because we've just seen this with other quarterbacks. Like, Lamar gets hurt almost every single year because of the grind that he goes through.
Josh Allen's crazy. Like he can't, he's a big dude. You cannot be him, and he's getting hurt every single year in some way.
Exactly. And then, like, I could go through a bunch of examples, but really what this all boils down to is in 2012, we had one of these guys, and he ended up getting hurt in a way that he basically was never the same. So I just think week to week, we're more keen to this than other fan bases too, because we've literally watched it happen in front of our eyes with certain guys. Once again, I'm not saying that Jayden Daniels is RG3, because he's not at all, but we've seen it before. And I think it's worth acknowledging week to week, because then if he takes another 15 carries against the Bengals on Monday, and then another 15 carries 6 days later, all of a sudden we're going to go, oh, well, if he doesn't look the same against the Ravens, well, we know why, because he's taken 100 carries, in the first 4 or 5 weeks.
A couple other quick things. I thought the O-line was very good against the Giants, especially the guards, Nick Allegretti and Sam Cosmi. And then Tyler Biadasz, he had a very tough assignment again. He got Dexter Lawrence. Vita Vea week 1, Dexter Lawrence again. I thought he did pretty well against him. You're going to have some misses, obviously, against Dexter Lawrence. Might be the best interior defensive tackle in the game going right now. It's a possibility. But he was very good. The way they the run game results ought to tell you everything you need to know about what they did. I saw a re-energized Andrew Wiley, who I think we're learning very quickly here. I think he's more of a guard in a tackle's body. It'd be more the way I'd put it. So the more you run the ball, the more apt he is, I think, to be productive for you. He can also move a lot, kind of like a guard. He can move. So they have a very mobile offensive line. Biadasz can move. Cosmi, when he moves, can devastate people. He can be a road grader. And you'll see there's a couple of laughable moments where he knocked Giants over. They also timed up. So Cliff Kingsbury really timed up a couple of plays, not just the Eckler one in the second half where they did the throwback. They did like a middle tunnel screen where both Allegretti and Cosmi kind of just road graded the whole thing for him and got a big play there. So the timing of the calls is very good. All that feels good. And the offensive line looked good. And I'll say this too, Cornelius Lucas looked really good the other day. So I'm going to see with Brandon Coleman from here. I know that they love his athleticism. You can see him really move. But I think right now, just in what I've seen, and I'm not surprised, he's a rookie and he missed all of camp or all the preseason games because of a shoulder injury. Lucas is way ahead of him. So I want to see how they handle that moving forward.
No, that was my observation in person with the offensive line. They were kind of, kicking ass, taking names. They were like nasty on Sunday. I really liked the way that they were playing. And not to mention, I think the chemistry is there. Like, they're moving better. You can tell as a unit, they're all a little bit more on the same page than we saw last year. And no, I really like them. I like the nastiness on Sunday too. That's how you kind of take out teams like the Giants. You want to just, as Doc would say, impose your will on them. That's seemingly what they did for most of the game.
I mean, they're talking about this since mid-camp. I am not surprised that this team is going to lean more towards becoming a physical run team. Like, that's just kind of the makeup of their receivers. I think their inability to really stretch the field, and Eckler, if he's going to be like this, like the guy from a couple of years ago, and B-Rob, and then, of course, Daniels running the ball, I think this is a 50-50 run team. Like, and that's unusual in the NFL these days, but I think that that's their strength. Last one real quick. Frankie Louvu is just a monster. Like, he's everything they said he would be. Logan said this, like, I don't think you'll hear it on this segment, but he goes, I don't know how he plays that way constantly. Like, where he's just like, feels like he's just overly excitable and he's everywhere. And we saw it really in this one. He almost knocked Neighbors out of the game on a just recovery play down the field. He had a near miss where he just missed the snap count, got called for an offside, but he was running so fast. He's a flash. Like they always say, like, you see people flash. He's constantly doing it. He's everything they said he would be so far.
Yeah, no, he was great too. He was one that was really standing out on Sunday as well. I mean, all the middle of the defense looks good, period. I mean, I like, at least in the linebacking and the safety core, they all are swarming to the ball. I like their attitude as well. And Lugo, of course, was actually making a difference, so yeah.
All right, let me take a quick break. Bram watch the show. ESPN 630, the Sports Capital. Welcome back. Bram watch the show, ESPN 630, the Sports Capital. Every week after each Commanders game, I go down to the park and meet up with my booth mates, London Fletcher and this week Logan Paulson, to do what's called the Booth Review, a podcast that's produced and put out there. And every week they're kind enough to give me a segment to play for you. London was out this week. He had a personal matter that he was dealing with. So it was just me and Logan Paulson. So yesterday, went down to the park, met up with Logan, and we got to share our thoughts on what was probably one of the most unusual games that I can remember. The stat that came out was that since World War II, it's only been 5 times that Washington won a game without scoring a touchdown. And in this case, they set a franchise record with 7 field goals. The Giants scored 3 touchdowns and lost to a team that didn't score one. Really highly unusual game. So Logan and I had a lot to kind of dissect and go through. There were a lot of things that were kind of going back and forth throughout the whole thing, and a lot of factors, including the injury to Graham Gano, the Giants kicker, which marginalized them, attempting field goals. They went for 2 a couple of times. They missed an extra point. They couldn't kick what would have been a take the lead field goal late in the fourth quarter. They had to go for a 4th down when they were clearly in field goal range. So that clearly marginalized the whole thing. So there was a lot to talk about. At the same time, here's this team, Washington, that settles for all of these field goals, and yet they scored on every true drive that they had. So this was really one of the most unusual things to try to break down and think about. And in the middle of the show, we brought out a new segment called You Saw, We Saw, Seesaw, which is what we think you guys are out there talking about, what we think we saw, and putting it into context, and we're on the seesaw with one another. So here was me and Logan Paulson on the Booth Review.
So Allen and Payne were silent, right? And I get that. And so when I see that, I think everyone says, oh my gosh, like, we're terrible. We're supposed to be good up front. We paid them all this money. What I see is in the second half, I saw Joe Witt Jr. adjust to what the Giants were doing offensively. They got out of playing man-to-man coverage. And when you look at Tampa Bay, one of the reasons that John and Duran were so effective is they were able to bring all of these man pressures. Frankie Louvu up the A-gap, Bobby Wagner on the stunt, and we're able to get those guys into one-on-one matchups. When we're in our soft cover 2, right? Our kind of cover 2 quarters were backed up off the ball, kind of with that soft coverage contour. They're eating double teams, right? And I don't care how good you are, it's hard to eat double teams like that unless you're Dexter Lawrence or Chris Jones, right? So I think Joe Witt Jr. was able to identify a weakness in the defense, and it hurt John and Duran in terms of their production. But that's not going to be the case every week. And I think I trust Joe Witt Jr. to look at what they're doing and say, I want to be a man pressure team, but right now we don't have the cornerbacks to do that. What can we develop from a zone pressure standpoint? And can we help those guys still be productive while insulating our secondary? Now, that's going to take a lot of excellent coaching, but I don't know. You've talked to Joe Witt Jr. Like, every time you talk to him, just like, this guy gets it. And I fully expect him, and I know he's capable of making I'm not saying that specific transition, but a transition like that.
Okay, let me go back to what you just said then, because that was really interesting. So you think that they want to be something, but they might not have the personnel to actually do it, so they're kind of adjusting on the fly to that.
Definitely in this game, I mean, you saw it too, right? And like, how many times did we say, oh, they're in man coverage, and then there's an explosive play to Malik Neighbors? And again, it's not the players specifically at fault, but they were able to identify man coverage, run picks, get guys open. And again, in the secondary, they're just having a hard time matching concepts like that right now. So let's alleviate some of that pressure. Let's get into some different stuff. And they did. And it was effective because it slowed the offense down. So how cool is that? How many times have we talked about, coordinator X didn't make this adjustment? And here, live and in living color, we see a coordinator make an adjustment. And does it hurt some of the players in the team? Yeah, but it lets them win the football game, which I think is excellent coaching.
Okay, then let's go back to the middle of the line again, right?
Sorry, we went on like a little odyssey there, just around.
Right, no, good.
Through. Yeah.
Allen and Payne are not both seeing double teams all the time. That would be pretty much impossible for that to be the case.
Surprisingly, in this game, it was kind of true, because basically what they came out, and if I'm the Giants, I'm looking at like, where is the money invested? Where's the strength of this team? It's on the interior offensive line. And so what they do, that's why this is so fun. We get to review all this stuff. But they basically came out with that wing set, the Y and the F tight end there. And when you add that to a 4-man front, you get double teams literally across the board except for one player, and they have Andrew Thomas. So every other person in the front is getting double teamed if you're not bringing a pressure. So why do you think they ran that personnel grouping probably 10 times, 12 times in that game? It's because we can get double teams in the run, we can get double teams in the pass game, and they're going to be good double teams because we're going to be soft in coverage. Again, how many times in the first half did we see Daniel Jones versus 2 shell check to a run, and they just would run duo right up the middle of the field? When you run 2 shell in the NFL, you will get that response, and I don't care how good you are up front, it's hard to stop the run when we have 7 blockers and there's only 7 defenders, because there's no one to tackle the running back. Someone's got to get off a block, and I think that's what you saw there. So schematically, they're put in a tough spot because of some of the stuff they had to do in the back end.
So you expect this to be replicated?
The Giants' game plan?
The Bengals have a different quarterback and different receiver group, so I have a hard time buying that they're replicating that.
So if I'm the Bengals, I look at this and say, like, this is an effective solution, and we don't want them to be in cover 2 shell. So one way to get them out of cover 2 shell is to run the heck out of the ball. I don't know if they're physically capable of doing that with the personnel.
Right.
Like, if you look at how the Giants constructed their O-line, it's a little bit of like a meat grinder kind of deal there. Like, they want to do that. Bengals, they want to throw the ball a lot. So if I'm Joe Witt Jr., I'm like...
The Giants keep getting hit on their offensive line and the lack of production through the years. They've actually spent a lot of money and a lot of assets on it in recent years. Oddly, Evan Neal's not part of that seemingly any longer. He must have fallen off of...
Bad.
But Andrew Thomas has turned out to be a very good left tackle. John Michael Schwartz was a very high draft pick. They just spent money on Illuminor and Runyon.
Right tackle,
Yeah, so they're fixing that. Yeah. And to your point, they looked at Washington's strength and went right at it.
Yeah, and again, you can maximize those guys inside through movement, stunts, pressures. But if we can't cover it up on the back end, like, I don't want to call that, because that's how you lead. That leads to explosive plays in the offense. So I understand that there's a bit of frustration there, but I think when you look at the flow of the game, it needed to happen. It needed to happen to slow them down and get us the win. And ultimately, like, I think John and Duran would say the same thing. Like, the priority isn't me having 10 tackles. It's me winning the football game.
That's right. Week 1, they actually won a lot at the point of attack.
Yes.
They just didn't get the sacks.
Right.
Didn't finish the plays. This week against Daniel Jones, and we were talking about it in the booth, you have to disrupt him because he doesn't see the field very well. He throws the ball into dangerous places. He will turn the ball over. I saw him against Minnesota a couple times slide into where the pressure was coming from. Like, he gets rattled, for lack of a better term. They didn't rattle him yesterday. So getting some, because I can't believe this was true, but I cited this in the pregame yesterday. You know, he has the best quarterback rating of any Giants quarterback ever. Now, nobody would ever think that about him.
What?
But he does. Yes. He has
Ever?
Yes. Of any Giants quarterback ever. Better.
Eli Manning?
Yes.
Really?
He has a better quarterback rating at this point. Nobody thinks of him that way because he hasn't won very much, but he does. You need to move him. If he stands in the pocket, he's actually very effective and very accurate, and he can run the ball. We saw that yesterday. I was worried he couldn't really, well, not worried.
This is a tangent. What's his quarterback rating? Do you remember?
I don't remember. It ain't great, but it's shocking. Like when you think of Eli Manning, you're like, what are you talking about? But if you actually think about Eli Manning, and the complaint about him always was, you were in the sports radio world, is he elite? That went on for years. He'd win, they'd go to Super Bowls, and then people would ask, is he elite? Because his stats are kind of like, during the course of the season.
Right.
Anyway, like, they did not pressure. They didn't finish against Baker, couldn't get him down. Probably would have had 5 sacks otherwise.
Right.
And then with Daniel Jones, I don't think they got enough consistent pressure on him, didn't move him around. So what do you make of just kind of in general the pass rush?
I think it goes back to that same thing we were just talking about. Like, schematically, like, you're going to have a hard time. Like, they know what he is, and they're going to – that's what I'm saying. This is an NFL team. They're going to get level. Like, they look at what they saw last week. They're going to have a plan for that. And so I think that's what they did. And I think there's going to be – so, for example, let's just take Cincinnati that's coming up here, right? If they're going to be like, we're going to throw the ball a bunch, if I'm Joe Witt Jr., I'm like, we're going to find ways to bring line stunts, to loop guys around. We know what you're doing. You watch how Dallas plays teams that throw the ball a lot, i.e. the Commanders last year. Like, they're able to create a ton of pressure with 4 because it's a passing down every single time. And I'm very confident that Joe Witt Jr., Dan Quinn, Darryl Tapp will find a way to maximize that. Because, again, when you look at individual win percentages here, they're not going to be super high. But when you look at the group, I think you can cultivate a group that can be maximized here. And I think Frankie Louva rushing the passer is also going to be pretty dynamic.
Yeah, one of the things on we saw seesaw was missed tackles, which was clearly a big part of week 1. A little bit yesterday. I agree with you on Louvu.
Yeah.
Like, his energy, his ability to be around the ball, he's a disruptive player.
He's so disruptive, and I don't know how he plays this way all the time, but like the physicality, like the physicality that he plays with, like, again, there's missed tackles, every week. And again, that's got to be corrected. I'm not saying that. But having a piece like Louvu is incredible. Like, the way he fits on guards, I've never seen a linebacker just snap the offensive line head. Like, he almost knocked Malik Neighbors out of the game in a pursuit tackle, like chasing him from behind. Like, he is a physical, explosive, violent guy who plays with a great motor. And I think that's a piece, right? And as you build around those pieces, I think you're just going to, again, this is a work in progress, right? But having that core piece, a really talented piece in the middle of the defense, I think is pretty fantastic.
It was interesting. Like, in the spring and the summer, after they had signed him, I called some of my colleagues down in Carolina, and I'm like, just tell me about him. And all of them were like, we don't know why he's not here. They were like, we don't know why they wouldn't have brought him back.
Right.
Like, we don't get it. Like, he was one of those. They would give me the reasoning behind Jeremy Chin. Oh, he had these injuries or whatever they would say. But with Louvu, all of them were like, we don't know what it was they didn't like.
Right.
That led him to leaving. They didn't understand it.
I will say, when you watch this film, I don't understand why they leave. Like, obviously, so what do we got? Oh, we
after the game. So Bram was right.
So before...
It dropped after the game. But he is still ahead of Eli Manning. Yeah. Do you know who Y.A. Tittle is?
No, I don't.
He's a Hall of Famer, but that's not important right now. Jones pre-game had the best Giants quarterback rating ever coming into the game, and just fell by 0.2 points behind the great Y.A. Tittle. And my father is looking down on me today, so proud that I know who Y.A. Tittle is. Me and Logan Paulson on the Booth Review. You can get that wherever you get your podcasts. You can check it out on commanders.com, and you can watch it on the Commanders YouTube channel. And of course, hey, subscribe to this show. This is a podcast that comes out right after it airs on ESPN 630, 12 o'clock every single day. And you can check out me and Callow on the Ampire Media YouTube page as well. We tape a lot of our segments there, so you can see us do the show every morning. That also comes out right at noon. Ampire Media YouTube page, Ampire Media YouTube. Or you could just download and subscribe to the podcast. All right, back after this. Bram watch the show, ESPN 630, the Sports Capital. All right, welcome back. Bram watch the show, ESPN 630, the Sports Capital. Let's talk about a couple other things that are going on around the league, which is Bryce Young got benched by Carolina after just 2 games. They're turning it over to Andy Dalton. You know, I'm not going to sit here and pretend that I've seen much of outside of highlights and read reports about what happened in Carolina's 2 games. Obviously, they've been blown out in both. New Orleans is off to as ridiculous a start as I think I've seen anybody offensively. And then, you know, you play a Harbaugh team. What do you say whatever you want about them? They're going to be very buttoned up. They're going to be very physical, and they just shut that team down. I thought when they hired Dave Canales, I'm like, this is a good hiring just to answer a very singular question for them. Is Bryce Young an NFL starting quarterback? And Dave Canales went to Seattle and helped Geno Smith turn his career around, and went to Tampa and helped turn Baker Mayfield's career around. And I don't think that's a coincidence. So, like, he clearly knows how to work with quarterbacks. And here's one that in his rookie season struggled, and it's really gone badly. The body language was really poor. His press conference afterwards was very telling because it was almost emotional, almost like he was going to cry. And so, you know, I think the team, everybody's doing the right thing here. I know he's going to get mocked or made fun of or whatever. He's the number 1 overall pick, and he gets benched in year 2 early, you know, very early. But, you know, I firmly believe that sometimes you just need to take a breath, take a reset. Clearly, this is whatever they're doing down there is not working for him. I agree that right now, Andy Dalton is a better option for them to try to be more competitive. And I think they're doing the right thing by him. I don't know how much his people are probably maybe involved in this, or he's involved in this. I was talking to you yesterday on your show, and you were telling me that it was kind of a collective, the president, the GM, the coach, probably the owner, all were talking about this. And to me, that reads like his people are also involved in talking about this. And I'm glad they're doing this because I don't think we know whether he's a very good player or not. But I do know it's not working there. It's only going to get worse. These weeks start to get really short in the NFL, and it's hard to get your confidence back. And if you lose it at that position, he's going to get hurt. You know, like I think they're all doing the right thing. Let's take a step back. My gut tells me he's going to be somewhere else next year. I don't know that it's going to happen now, but I think he's going to be somewhere else, and that's probably good for everybody. And then Carolina will just have to take the hit for what ends up being maybe the worst trade in NFL history because of all the things the Bears got for them to get him. But it would be the right thing to do, I think, for them and probably for him, you know, to like take it easy, relax, find a new place, and try to get your career back on track again. Because once you lose your confidence in this league, it is very tough to get it back, and especially at that position.
It's a couple of factors here that I thought about after my show yesterday. I think one of them, too, is this isn't being benched after 2 weeks. This is being benched after the entirety of the offseason, training camp, and preseason. You don't get benched 2 games into the season unless it's been going this way for a little bit. And if Canales is the guy that's rehabbed Geno and Baker, it means that he kind of saw it, too, that, hey, if this guy doesn't perform in the game, I'm going to pull the trigger real fast at Dalton. That's where I'm kind of landing today of, this isn't the last 2 weeks. This is the last 6 to 8 weeks, right? Probably. Not to mention the one stat I saw on Young that I think is actually indicative of how bad he's been is he's been the most inaccurate quarterback in the NFL the last 2 weeks. And then the balls that are actually getting to his wide receivers, they're not helping him out either. So it's this combination of he's not accurate, and then when he actually does get the ball out, he's getting drops or they're not accurate enough. This is one of those ones you're probably trying to save him if Dalton struggles, but you get, Young off for a month here that he gets to take some mental reps, and then you get him back in, and then you hope that maybe something clicks here. But I look at this one as they've seen this one, and they're going, all right, it hasn't worked for 2 weeks. We've got a beatable opponent in the Raiders. that, or at least is in the same tier as us with the Raiders. We're going to try to get a win with Dalton. And not to mention, I think the division has made them do this too. You have 2-2-0 teams in your division. You can't let it slip anymore.
Yeah. I mean, I agree. This is a rough spot that they're in. I think they're doing the right thing by him. And I'm not really sure, where it actually goes from here with them. One other thing I did want to mention, and are they ever going to live down? If CJ Stroud is going to continue doing this and Bryce Young is going to be that, boy, it's going to be a hard one for them to live down for a long time. All right, last one here. And that is, we didn't talk about this yesterday, but Caleb Williams is not off to, I think, the start the Bears would hope. They come in with a lot of really great offensive weapons, albeit Keenan Allen didn't play the other night. And it's been a no-show offensively for them through 2 weeks. They're 1-1. They managed 13 points against Houston. They managed only 10 offensively in the win over Tennessee. They got a special teams touchdown and a pick six. So it's not been the start that they're looking for either. So I don't know where that one goes. Obviously, I'm not making any judgment calls on him yet. And I think it's way too early, in the same way that I wouldn't make any judgment calls on Jayden early, even though he obviously looks the part, feels the part, seems ahead of the curve, et cetera, et cetera. But in Chicago, the body language there, especially from when you see how the receivers are reacting to him, is not great. We'll see what goes from there. All right. Talk to you tomorrow. Bram Show, ESPN 630 is